Hello, my friend. Today I will tell you another long-forgotten legend. Close your eyes and let the magic transport you to Middle-earth. Our journey begins in the hush of the Elder Woods, where light falls like lace through silver-leafed canopies, and the stars still whisper the songs of forgotten ages. There once was a stillness that was not peace. It began with the trees, not in a cry, nor in a breaking of branch or storm-plit trunk, but in silence, a quiet so deep that even the roots seemed to hold their breath. The birds did not sing in the dawn. The squirrels ceased their scampering games. The wind, once playful through the leaves, passed by as though mourning. The elves of the woodland realm noticed at first the way the leaves of the mal curled before their time, as if shying from the sun. The blossoms of Elanor and Nifredil dimmed in hue, their golden fire dulled to ash, and in the twilight the stars no longer seemed to reflect in the pools of Lorien. At first it was thought to be sorrow, grief in the land, echoing the grief of its people, for the world was changing slowly, imperceptibly, but changing all the same. The age of elves was drawing thin like the last light on the edge of evening. But this was something deeper, something older. The healers of the Galadrim sang their most ancient songs to the trees, to the soil, to the fading flowers. Yet no answer came, and the whisper of dread began to pass from glade to glade. It was then that Radagast heard the cry, not with his ears, for it was not a sound meant for mortals or Maya. It came on the wings of moths at twilight, fluttering in erratic patterns. It echoed in the strange hush of the hedgehogs who had stopped curling into sleep. It throbbed in the sigh of rivers, once joyous, now murmuring like old men with forgotten tales. Radagast the Brown, called a Wendell in the tongue of the West, dwelt in the woods beyond Mirkwood's edge, in a little cottage woven from ivy and oak root. Most in Middle-earth had long since ceased to speak of him. Some said he had wandered into madness, too enamored of birdsong and badgers to concern himself with the world's fate. Others claimed he had vanished altogether, fading into moss and memory. But he remained. And though he preferred the company of rabbits and ravens to that of kings, his heart still beat in time with the song of Arda. When the balance of things trembled, Radagast felt it, not in thought, but in spirit, like a sudden cold wind on a still morning. He stood that dawn at the threshold of his home, wrapped in a robe the color of bark and earth, and listened. A single leaf drifted down before him. It was not golden nor green, but pale, and its veins were black as ink. He caught it gently in his hands and closed his eyes. Within it he felt absence, not of life, but of memory, as if the tree had forgotten how to grow, as if the land itself were losing its will to remember what it once had been. And so he knew this was not decay alone. This was not time's gentle erosion. This was a sickness, a plague, and it had found its way into the oldest veins of Middle-earth. That night, Radagast sat by the fire, his staff resting against the hearth, his long fingers curled around a mug of steaming root tea. His eyes were distant, cast into the flames. Around him, creatures of every kind nestled in warmth, a fox with eyes like amber glass, a pair of sleepy owls, a badger snoring softly beneath the table. But his thoughts were far from the quiet comfort of his home. He remembered a dream from many years ago, long buried beneath layers of waking days. In it, the stars had fallen like tears, The forests had stood still, not dead, but silent, like mourners after a funeral. And in the dream, a voice had whispered, "When the light forgets itself, remember me." Radagast had never known whose voice it was. A spirit of Yavanna, perhaps, or one of the Maya, whose name had been lost in the east. But the dream clung to him now, like mist. He turned to the birds perched near the rafters. "The trees are calling," he said softly. "They are losing their song." A raven tilted its head. South it croaked. Radagast nodded. Yes, Greenwood, the old heart of it. "Dark," said the owl. "Yes," murmured Radagast. "Darker than it has been since the shadow of Dol Guldur first crept across the roots." But he did not shiver. He rose instead, slow and thoughtful, and reached for his staff. The runes along its length shimmered faintly in the firelight. He wore no armor, only his robe, threadbare and earthen. But as he stepped outside, the trees themselves seemed to bend toward him. He whispered a single word, and the moths stirred from the eaves. They circled him in a slow spiral, their wings brushing the air with a sound like turning pages. "To Greenwood we go," he whispered, and the forest answered, not in speech, but in wind, warm and low, like breath upon the neck. And so began his journey, not of miles, but of memories. For the plague, he sensed, was not one of blood and fever. It was a forgetting, a slow unweaving of the stories that bound the elves to their lands, to the stars, to themselves. And somewhere in the shadowed places between root and ruin, the source awaited, ancient and buried. Radagast, the brown wizard, once thought lost in solitude, had heard the call, and he would answer it. The path into Greenwood, which the men had long since come to call Mirkwood, was not carved with roads, nor marked with signs. It wound through ancient groves like the memory of a forgotten song, faint but familiar, hidden beneath centuries of shadow and sorrow. As Radagast stepped beyond the boundary of his woodland refuge, the land itself seemed to change beneath his feet, not in sudden rupture, but in slow, solemn shift, like the breath of a dream deepening into sleep. The sky above was a dome of dimming gold, bruised at the edges with the violet hush of oncoming dusk. Clouds passed like solemn thoughts across the heavens, casting moving shadows over the forest floor, as if the very light mourned something it could not name. The trees, tall and many-limbed, stood like silent witnesses to the ages, their bark gnarled with time, their crowns entangled like the fingers of ancient gods in restless prayer. Their silence was not of peace, but of withholding, like a grief too deep for speech. As Radagast moved between the roots and trunks, his robes brushed the undergrowth with a sound like sighs in sleep. Moss covered the stones, damp and soft, but with a faint chill that clung to his bare fingers when he reached down to touch the earth. It was not death he felt there, but something stranger, a thinning of memory, as though the land itself were struggling to recall the rhythm of its own pulse. The soil should have hummed with life, but now it only murmured in fragments, like a voice half lost in fog. The birds no longer sang. Their absence was not an emptiness, but a presence unto itself, thick, uneasy, and watching. The only sounds were the creak of old wood and the low murmur of distant water, winding through the roots like a forgotten tale. Every so often a branch above would sway, not with wind, for there was none, but with some deeper breath, as if the forest itself stirred uneasily in its dreaming. Radagast paused by an old ash tree whose roots curled above ground like the limbs of a sleeping beast. He rested his hand against its trunk and let his breath slow. Beneath his fingers, he felt the faintest echo of life, but it was like listening to a harp string long since loosed, its resonance soft and wavering, unsure whether to hold or to fade. "You remember, don't you?" he whispered, not to the tree alone, but to the place itself. "You remember what it was to bloom with moonlight, to speak with leaf and star. But something has wound itself around your heart." A breeze stirred then, barely more than a whisper, and it carried with it the faint scent of withered blossoms and wet bark, mingled with something subtler, more sinister, a sweetness that had turned to rot, like fruit forgotten on the vine. The smell of beauty unraveling, Radagast closed his eyes. His thoughts wandered then, unbidden, to the days of his arrival in Middle-earth. He had come not with the fire and thunder of war, nor with the heraldry of lords, but quietly stepping through the veil of time with a gentle curiosity for all living things. He remembered the first time he had heard the language of the foxes, the first time he had coaxed a field mouse from hiding, the first moment the wind had spoken his name through the rustling of the reeds. He had been content in those early centuries to listen, to learn the quiet rhythms of the world, and to understand its griefs without rushing to mend them. But now, the grief was different. Now it reached into the roots of all that once sang. Further along the path, if it could be called such, for no feet had tread there in many years, Radagast encountered a glade sunk low in the earth, like a bowl cupped in the hands of the forest. The light here was strange, diffused through layers of green canopy and falling like the shimmer of water through glass. In the center of the glade stood a tree that had once been golden, its bark pale as honey, and its leaves shaped like stars. Now those same leaves hung limp and gray, and the trunk bore dark stains like tears. Beneath it knelt an elf. He was motionless at first, his face pressed to the soil, his silver hair tangled with fallen leaves. Radagast's heart clenched. He had seen death before. He had watched deer fall beneath the teeth of wolves, seen GG struck from the sky. But there was something in the stillness of this figure that felt wrong. Not simply stilled by death, but drawn downward by some unseen weight, as though life itself had grown tired of being remembered. He stepped forward gently, his voice low and steady. "You are not alone, friend," he said, the words falling like dew unto the silence. The elf stirred slowly, as if waking from a sorrow too deep for dreams. He raised his face, and Radagast saw eyes that had once held starlight, now clouded like glass left to frost. I did not hear your coming," the elf said at last, and his voice was brittle as dry leaves. "But perhaps that is not strange. I have not heard the birds in many days." Radagast knelt beside him, laying a hand upon his shoulder. "You are not at fault for your silence," he said, "when the forest itself has grown too weary to listen." The elf, his name he would soon share, was Thalionel, blinked slowly, as if struggling to hold the shape of a thought in his mind. "My beloved lies ill," he murmured. "She was once a singer of trees. Her voice could coax a rose from slumber. But now she sleeps, and the petals fall from her hair, and I fear she dreams of nothing." There was a pause, and then, as if the forest itself were drawing closer, listening, he added, "We tried all we knew, songs of renewal, waters from the silver springs, herbs grown beneath the stars. Nothing stirred her. And now I feel the same forgetfulness crawling into me. Radagast looked at him with gentle sorrow, his brow furrowed, not in judgment, but in shared grief. "This is not an illness of body," he said softly. "It is a thinning of the soul. Something has touched the memory of the land, and where the elves are most deeply rooted, they too begin to fade." Elanor bowed his head. "Then we are lost, for we are memory made flesh. If the song forgets itself, how shall the singers endure?" Radagast's gaze drifted upward to the canopy where the wind stirred the dead leaves with a sound like whispered names. "Not lost," he said, "but imperiled. And peril can yet be answered." Thalionel looked at him then more fully, his face lined with a century's sorrow. "You are Radagast. I remember stories told in Rivendell long ago of the brown wizard who spoke with beasts and trees." "I am," said Radagast. "Though time has passed and the stories have faded like the echoes of old rivers, still I remember, and that is why I am here." Thalionel's voice trembled with a mixture of hope and fear. "Will you help her? Will you help us remember what we are?" Radagast stood slowly, his staff in hand, the runes along its length glowing faintly with an inner light. "I will try," he said, "but we must journey deeper, for the root of this forgetting lies not here in the glade, but in the darkened heart of the wood, where memory itself was once buried." The elf rose beside him, less steady than before, but with a spark kindling behind his gaze, and beneath their feet, unseen by either, the earth stirred ever so slightly, as if something very old had heard them. They moved together beneath the shifting shadows of Greenwood, though it no longer bore the scent of its older names. Once it had been Greenwood the Great, a name that rang with grandeur and spoke of unending canopies laced with golden light, of roots that twined deep into the very bones of Arda, of a land that remembered the laughter of the stars. But now, even the forest seemed uncertain of what it had once been, as Radagast and Thalionel passed beneath branches that drooped like sorrowful arms. They found themselves walking not merely through space, but through layers of memory and silence, each footfall unsettling a world that did not wish to be disturbed. The trees, once proud and wide in their reach, now leaned in strange angles, as if drawn by a weightless gravity toward some unseen point of despair. Their bark, which should have pulsed with sap and song, was mottled with streaks of gray and veins of black and lichen, like old stone edged with grief. The wind, when it came not to dance or sing, but to whisper in fractured syllables, as though carrying the remnants of dreams half remembered by the land itself. Even the air had changed. It clung to the skin like a forgotten thought, heavy with moisture that never quite became rain, perfumed faintly with decay and dampened roots. It was Thalionel who broke the silence first, and his voice, though soft, moved through the air like a lament. "There was a time," he said, gazing upward toward the leaf-choked sky, "when light poured through these branches like spilled wine, golden and careless, and the forest echoed with song. We would walk for days beneath the sun, never once fearing the dusk." He paused, his eyes searching the path ahead, as if seeking something that had long since vanished into mist. "Now I feel as though we walk not forward, but inward, into a hollow carved from our own forgetting. It is as though something ancient and cruel has placed a veil between what is and what once was, and our hearts are left grasping for shapes in fog. Radagast's staff touched the mossy ground beside him with each step, steady and slow, a quiet rhythm to balance the forest's weirward hush. His eyes, lined with the softness of centuries, flicked toward the elf. "Memory," he said, "is a strange thing. Among mortals it fades with time, worn smooth like stones in a riverbed. But among your kind, the elves do not forget, not in the way that men forget. When you lose memory, it is not as if a candle flickers out, but more like the very light of the stars being stolen from the heavens." Thalionel turned to him, his expression drawn, not with anger, but with an old and quiet ache. "And what becomes of an elf who forgets?" he asked, the question hanging in the air like mist over a lake. "What becomes of a people who once sang the first songs of the world, if those songs are drowned in silence?" Radagast's answer came not quickly, but with thoughtfulness that had grown in him over many years spent in listening rather than speaking. "I do not know," he admitted, his voice the sound of wind through leaves. "But I have seen birds lose the sky and deer forget their paths to the river. I have watched the stars vanish from the eyes of old creatures who once spoke of constellations by name. When memory is unraveled, being itself begins to dissolve, not in fire or war, but in stillness, in silence." They walked for a time in that silence, letting it stretch, not as absence, but as presence. The forest around them darkened as the light dimmed. There was no sun to watch descend. Rather, the world seemed to fall into dusk without ceremony, the way grief seeps into a house when the laughter is gone. Eventually, they came upon a clearing, a low hollow cupped between hills of moss and root. It should have been a place of beauty. A stream, narrow and clear, curled through the glade like a ribbon of glass, and pale ferns grew in its banks, their fronds shivering with unseen breath. But the beauty was muted, fragile, as if painted over rot. The trees that circled the hollow leaned inward, not protectively, but in mourning. Their branches stretched out like hands, trying to touch something that was no longer there. Thalionel stopped at the edge of the stream and fell to his knees. He cupped the water in his hands, stared at it, then let it fall back through his fingers. "Even the water forgets," he said. "There was a time when the streams of Greenwood sang names. Every bend and stone remembered a song. Now it flows in silence, as though it carries no history at all." Radagast knelt beside him, the soil soft beneath his knees, and dipped his own fingers into the stream. The water was cold, colder than it should have been, as if it had come not from springs, but from some deep place untouched by sunlight. He closed his eyes. "There is something," he whispered, "lying beneath this forgetting. Not just the absence of memory, but the presence of something else. A will, a hunger that thrives not on destruction, but on erasure." Thalionel looked at him with eyes still pale from sorrow, but touched now with a spark of fear. "A shadow without fire," he murmured. "A darkness that does not burn, but unweaves." Radagast nodded. "Yes, and I fear it is old, older than even the trees know. It is not new to this world, but has merely awakened or been stirred from slumber, something that the elves may have buried in time long ago, thinking it would never stir again." He looked around the clearing, at the trees bowed with silent grief, at the water flowing like a dream without voice. This place was once sacred, Can you feel it? Thalionel closed his eyes and breathed deeply. Yes, he said after a moment. It is like standing at the edge of a song, hearing only the echo of a note that once held all things together. Then here, said Radagast, we must linger, for if there is memory still hidden in this place, we must coax it out gently, like waking a friend from a long, troubled sleep. He drew a small satchel from within his robes and opened it carefully. Inside were seeds, tiny and gray, flecked with silver. These are seeds of Elanor, he said, a flower that only blooms in the presence of deep memory, where the world remembers itself most fully. If they take root here, we may find what was lost. The Lionel watched him with reverent stillness. Then plant them, he whispered. Let the land remember. And so they began, hands in soil, soft and slow. The planting was a ritual not of ceremony, but of remembrance. As they worked, the wind quieted, and even the trees seemed to lean closer, as though listening. The first seed fell, the second, and with the third, the earth trembled just slightly, like a breath caught in the chest of the world. And far beneath the soil, something stirred, not in wrath, but in awareness. Night had fallen over the glade with a tenderness so complete, so deliberate, it felt as though the very stars had dimmed their light in deference to the hush below. There was no wind, no ripple upon the stream, no cry of owl or fox, only a silence thick and deep like velvet pressed against the ears. Even the leaves, which in healthier times would have rustled gently with the passing of unseen breezes, now hung still and heavy, weighed down as though by the gravity of the moment. Overhead, the canopy arched like a cathedral of withering limbs, darkened with age and sorrow, and through its narrow cracks constellations blinked uncertainly, their once proud light blurred by a thin veil of high clouds. The seeds had been planted. Radagast sat beside the stream, his knees drawn close, his fingers stained with damp soil that clung like ash to his skin. His staff lay beside him, dimly aglow, its runes flickering like the dying embers of a forgotten hearth. He gazed not at the sky, nor the shadowed boughs above, but into the water where the reflection of stars trembled faintly. Yet even that faint shimmer failed to comfort. He saw in their flickering light not promise, but fragility, a light one breath away from vanishing entirely. Across from him, Thalionel sat likewise still, his back pressed against a stone blanketed in moss, his silver hair catching what little moonlight trickled through the leaves. His eyes, though open, were distant, as if gazing inward upon landscapes no mortal map could chart. For a long while neither spoke. Their shared silence was not awkward or strained. It was the silence of shared burdens, the kind that needs no breaking, only breathing. But eventually it was Thalionel who stirred first, his voice low and slow, shaped not by haste, but by the weight of his thoughts. "You spoke of a hunger," he said, his gaze still lost among the trees. "A will that unweaves not with fire, but with forgetting. That is a form of evil I do not understand. And that perhaps is what frightens me most. For fire I know, swords, poison, the cruelty of teeth and claw. Those things we elves have faced in one age or another. But this," he looked toward Radagast now, and the pain in his eyes was not raw but refined, aged and deepened like wine left long in the cask. "This is different. This is as though something wishes to erase us not from the world, but from the memory of the world. And what Radagast are the elves, if not memory given flesh? If even the trees forget our names, if even the rivers forget the sound of our songs, do we continue to exist at all? Or are we only the echo of a song whose singer has gone silent? Radagast listened, his brow furrowed with the kind of sympathy that had no remedy. He did not rush to answer, for some questions deserved the space to breathe, the dignity of silence. But when he did speak, it was as one who had pondered long, alone, among things that moved more slowly than sorrow. "There are songs, Thalionel," he said softly, "that live even after their notes are forgotten. Melodies that echo in the stones, in the bones of mountains, long after those who once sang them are dust. I have walked in valleys where the wind hums with the grief of ancient wars, grief so old that even the trees cannot name the battles. And yet the sorrow lingers like perfume in a closed room." He reached down to the water and let his fingers brush the surface. "Perhaps the true tragedy is not that we are forgotten by the world, but that we begin to forget ourselves, that the memory within becomes dulled by the silence without. And when that happens, when the flame of remembrance fades from within us, that is when the unweaving truly begins." Thalionel bowed his head. "Then this is not merely a blight of the land. It is a sickness of soul." "Yes," Radagast replied, "and like all sicknesses of the soul, it cannot be cured by root or herb alone. It must be named, it must be understood, and perhaps it must be grieved." The words settled between them like ash, not choking, but solemn, a benediction of truth. Around them, the glades seemed to listen, and the shadows that curled among the tree roots deepened, their edges growing still more indistinct, like dreams unraveling upon waking. And then, as if summoned by the solemnity of their speech, a change came over the clearing, not sudden, not loud, but gentle and strange. The stream, silent for hours, began to hum. Not a song precisely, but a vibration, a resonance, like the throat clearing of some ancient voice testing its memory. Radagast stood at once, his staff in hand, the runes along its surface now brightening, casting soft light into the gloom. Thalionel rose as well, his breath catching in his throat. The ground beneath their feet trembled, not with violence but with purpose, as if something long buried had stirred and turned over in its sleep. And then it happened. The first seed sprouted. It happened with no flash, no thunder. A pale green tendril, delicate as silk thread, pushed up through the soil at the glade's center. It curled once in the air, unfurling like the fingers of a waking child, and then settled, trembling into stillness. And from that tendril, a faint scent rose, a fragrance so subtle that it might have been imagined. And yet it held within it a weight of memory so profound that both elf and wizard staggered beneath its weight. It was the scent of ancient spring, of starlight falling upon 2 wet leaves, of the breath of Yana in the morning of the world. Thalionel pressed a hand to his chest, his eyes wide with something close to pain. "I remember," he whispered. "I remember the fields beyond Queenan when first we woke. I remember the song that shaped my name from starlight. I had forgotten." Broadus, too, felt the bloom of memories stirring in his bones, not his memories alone, but those of the world itself. He felt the pulse of the land, the heartbeat of forgotten hills, the murmur of roots who had once known joy. The sprout in the glade was no mere plant. It was a key, an awakening, a name spoken aloud after being long sealed in silence. But even as the beauty of that moment unfurled around them, the forest beyond the glade seemed to recoil. The trees shivered, not with wind, but with warning, and a groan rose from the depths of the wood. A sound not made by beast nor bird, but by the forest itself. Radagast turned, eyes narrowing. "It knows," he said. Thalionel looked at him, confusion in his gaze. "What knows?" Radagast did not answer at once. Instead, he stepped to the edge of the glade, his staff raised high. He closed his eyes and whispered a word in the old tongue, a word older than fire, older than shadow, a word spoken once in the presence of the Valor, and never again until now. The forest responded not with voice, but with movement. Far off, branches snapped, not like wind, like something walking, something vast, something awakening, whatever was buried, Radagast said at last, voice low and firm. Whatever wound this forgetting into the veins of the land, it has failed us, and it will not remain hidden much longer. Elanor's hands moved to the hilt of a long blade he had not drawn in decades. "Then we must go to meet it," he said, though his voice trembled. Radagast nodded. "But not in battle," he said. He looked back at the tiny sprout glowing faintly in the gloom. A beacon of memory reclaimed. "We will follow the memory," he whispered, "and let it lead us to what was lost." They walked at dawn, though the word hardly held meaning in that place anymore. The sun did rise somewhere far behind the gray veil of cloud and mist, but its light filtered down in splinters, fractured and one, struggling to pass through the dense canopy above. The forest had grown darker still, not in the way of nightfall, but in a deeper, more ancient sense, like a thought becoming lost in the recesses of the mind, or a name slipping from memory, even as it is spoken aloud. Even the dew upon the leaves seemed subdued, duller, as if touched by an unseen frost, though the air remained warm and heavy with the scent of decay. And beneath it all, the trees leaned inward, not from age or wind or the slow gravitation of time, but from something else, something almost sentient. Their trunks were twisted in subtle but unnatural ways, bent not by weather, but by some deeper deformation, like truths that had been half forgotten and warped in the forgetting. The underbrush thinned, but the shadows grew thicker, as though the light itself were retreating, unwilling to press too far into the forest's wounded heart. Radagast moved slowly, not from weariness, but from reverence. His steps were measured, his staff tapping gently against the roots and stones, like a monk's prayer beads clicking one by one in quiet supplication. His eyes scanned not just the path ahead, but the trees, the sky, the silent birds overhead. He listened not only with his ears, but with the parts of his soul that were more attuned to the patterns of the world. The ebb and flow of hidden music, the rhythms of wind and water and root. For Radagast, silence was never emptiness. It was language. And this silence was no longer that of sleep or waiting. It was the silence of something watching. Thalionel followed close, his steps lighter but no less deliberate. His elven eyes could see farther than Radagast's, but they were clouded still by sorrow. And within that sorrow, a strange weariness had taken root. Not the weariness of body, nor even of mind, but a deeper fatigue, a soul tiredness that weighed more heavily than chain or stone. He felt it most when he tried to remember her, his beloved, whose name had once been a song on his lips each morning. Now, though he still remembered her face, he found that her laughter was difficult to summon. Her voice elusive like a note heard in a dream, but forgotten upon waking. As they walked, Thalionel spoke not suddenly, but gradually, as though drawing each word from some deep and reluctant well within. "I have often wondered," he began, his voice barely more than a murmur against the stillness, "if it is possible for a people to die before they perish, if to be forgotten by the world, and worse, to forget oneself, is a kind of death that no grave can contain." He paused, and when Radagast did not interrupt, he continued, the words unraveling with increasing weight and slowness. "I remember when the stars first shone in my eyes," he said, his gaze lifting to the canopy, though no stars could be seen in the fading morning. "I remember the shores of Kievan, and the sound of water like laughter echoing through trees whose names have long been lost. But now those memories come to me as if they belonged to another, like the tale of a man I once lived." He breathed deeply, and the forest seemed to hold its breath with him. "I thought I understood loss," he said. "We elves have lost much. Kin kingdoms, treasures of beauty beyond reckoning. But I was wrong. I knew grief, yes, but I did not know the ache of unbeing, of vanishing not in body, but in spirit, of feeling one's past dissolve not into dust, but into absence." Radagast, who had listened with the quiet patience of trees, finally replied, his voice low and slow as the groan of old timbers shifting beneath snow. "I have seen such a thing," he said. "Though it is rare, most beings die simply. The flame flickers and it goes out. But there are times, rare and tragic, when the flame is not extinguished, but forgotten, as though the wick itself disbelieves it ever carried fire." He looked to the trees whose branches curled now like claws above them. "It is a grief older than the world," he continued, "to be unwritten." Thalionel nodded slowly, as if the motion itself were a burden. "Then perhaps that is the enemy we face. Not a beast of fang or talon, but something more subtle, a spirit that devours not flesh, but remembrance that erases rather than wounds." Radagast stopped then, placing his hand against the bark of a nearby tree. It was rough, mottled with strange lichen that shimmered faintly in the half-light. And beneath his palm he felt a tremor, not physical, but deeper, like a breath caught in a throat. "This tree," he whispered, "was once a friend to song. I can feel its echo, like the ghost of a bell, long silent." He closed his eyes and sang, not a loud song, not even a melody, but a thread of tone, low and even, woven with care. A single note repeated, rising only slightly, and then falling again, over and over, as though coaxing a name from sleep. And slowly, painfully, the lichen pulsed with light, pale green, like spring remembered through tears. The bark beneath his hand warmed, and for a moment the tree sighed, but then the light faded quickly, and the warmth receded. The song could not hold. Radagast stepped back, his shoulders heavy with sadness. "It is as if they want to remember," he said. "But something holds them fast, some hand upon their roots, some whisper in the soil that says, forget. Thalionel approached, placing his hand on the same bark, and closed his eyes. "Then we must descend," he said, "not in direction, but in depth. If the plague lies beneath remembrance, then we must go where the land remembers deepest, to the hollow places, to the heart of this forest." Radagast nodded slowly. "Yes," he said, "to the source, to where memory sleeps, and perhaps to where it was first betrayed." And so they turned from the dim path and stepped into the deeper woods, where no trail remained, and the trees grew so close that daylight could no longer breathe. The undergrowth thickened with bramble and thorn, but the way ahead did not deter them, for they were no longer walking to escape the shadow, they were walking toward it. And as they passed beneath an arch of blackened limbs, two trees that had grown together like lovers now fused in grief. The forest closed behind them, silent as a sealed tomb. Only the faintest echo of Radagast's song remained, but even that somewhere in the roots had been heard. They passed into the deeper wood, as though crossing not merely a threshold of place, but of time and thought, as if the forest itself grew older the farther they walked. Not older in the sense of years counted and recorded, but older in a way that defied chronology, in the way dreams feel ancient, though born in sleep. Or how sorrow, when unspoken long enough, becomes indistinguishable from the stone beneath it. The light that reached them was filtered through so many layers of bow and mist that it lost all clarity, falling instead in shafts of murk that turned the world around them into a slow, perpetual twilight. There was no clear division of day and night here. Time itself had begun to loosen its grip, to become as malleable as rooted earth, soft underfoot and damp with secrets. The trees had changed, though not all at once. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, their shapes had become stranger, less familiar in their posture, less welcoming in their silence. What had once been noble trunks rising like columns of living stone had become twisted, their limbs gnarled and reaching like the hands of drowned kings rising from unseen depths. Bark sloughed from them in patches like old skin, revealing beneath it veins of pale wood that glowed faintly, eerily, as though something within pulsed not with life but with memory, fragmented, unfinished, half erased. Moss no longer grew in carpets but in strands, hanging like threads of forgotten names, heavy with moisture, dense with scent. Even the very air had changed. It no longer moved naturally through the glades, but lingered, thick, cool, and damp, like the breath of a being too vast to see and too quiet to hear. There were no birds, no insects, no movement save their own, and yet the sense of presence pressed against their skin, an invisible weight upon their shoulders and the napes of their necks. It was as though the forest had become aware of their presence, not merely observing them but studying them, and not with curiosity but with recognition. Radagast slowed his pace, his staff held loosely in one hand, his other brushing the leaves and vines that hung low like curtains between one realm and another. His face bore the stillness of deep concentration, but beneath it flickered something more elusive, an uncertainty, rare and unwelcome. For even among the wise, there are things that defy knowing. He paused beside a tree whose roots coiled like serpents over a long forgotten stone, and with a hand as gentle as the breath of autumn, he touched its bark. The response was immediate, though not violent, a shudder, a sigh from within, as if the tree dreamed and had turned in its sleep. "They are not dead," he murmured almost to himself, though Thalionel was close enough to hear. "They are dreaming, Or, no, not dreaming, rem. The elf stepped closer, his eyes darkened by shadow and thought. Then they still feel, still know. Radagast turned his gaze upon him, and his eyes, usually soft with kindness and the simple joys of birds and beasts, were solemn, almost haunted now. "Not in the way you or I know," he replied. "Not with words or images, not with sense, but in the way that rivers remember the paths they once carved into stone, or in the way fire remembers the wood it consumed. These trees, they do not remember themselves, but something remembers through them." Thalionel frowned, his gaze trailing across the canopy above. "Then they are vessels," he said quietly, "empty of will, but full of echo. Like tombs built not for the dead, but for the memory of the dead." Radagast nodded slowly, the comparison settling over him like dust. "Yes," he said, "and whatever lies beneath this forest, whatever we seek, it is not simply evil. It is not fire or fury or rot. It is silence, purposeful silence. A silence that does not allow mourning or recollection, but instead consumes the space where memory ought to be." The elf Gigi breathed deeply, his chest rising with the weight of thought. "Then it is not destruction that threatens us," he said, "but the erasure of meaning. And without meaning, what remains of anything?" Gigi lingered between them like smoke, and neither spoke further as they walked, each wrapped in their own spiraling reflection. Beneath their feet the ground softened, sloping gradually downward, the path becoming less a trail and more a descent, a corridor through living walls of bark and vine. The further they went, the more the forest began to feel subterranean, though they remained above ground. The light thinned further until it was no more than a whisper, and they moved as if by instinct, guided not by sight but by sense, of presence, of direction, of need. Eventually they emerged into a wide circular hollow, a depression in the forest floor surrounded by towering trees whose trunks bent inward at the top, forming a vault of limbs like the ribs of some great sleeping beast. At the center of this glade, if it could be called such, stood a monolith of black stone, cracked and veined with silver, as though light had once tried to escape from within and failed. Around its base the earth was bare and dry, untouched by root or moss, and the silence here was absolute. Radagast approached slowly, reverently, and stood before the stone. He reached out not to touch it, but to feel the air around it, which buzzed faintly, like the hum of ancient voices caught in stone. His voice, when he spoke, was softer than the fall of leaves. "This is a seed," he said, "not of a tree, but of forgetting. Planted long ago, nurtured in silence, fed by the memories it consumes." Elanor stepped forward, the light from the runes of Radagast's staff casting strange shadows across his face. "Can it be undone?" he asked, though even as he spoke his voice wavered, not with fear, but with a kind of grief that was almost awe. Or must it be faced and named and suffered? Radagast did not answer at once. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply, letting the pulse of the monolith pass through him. It was a strange pulse, not evil, not malevolent in the way of Sauron or Morgoth, but deeper, colder, impersonal. It was the pulse of forgetting itself, the kind of power that erases not through pain, but through disuse, that buries and waits. Finally, he opened his eyes. We must speak to it, he said, not with anger, not with power, but with remembrance. We must call to it not as an enemy, but as a wound in need of healing. For it is not only the elves who have forgotten, it too has been forgotten. It too is the echo of something that once knew its place. Thalionel stared at the monolith, his face unreadable. Then let us remember, he said, for all that has been lost, for those who sleep, for those who are vanishing still. And Radagast raised his staff, and the forest held its breath. There was a stillness in that hollow, so absolute, so deliberate, it seemed to have weight, pressing against the skin and bones of those who dared to stand within it. The air no longer moved. It did not stir with wind or breath, or even the tremble of unseen creatures hiding in root or burrow. It had the quality of stone, dense, unyielding, and ancient. Above them, the trees that ringed the glade bent inward in silent congress, their limbs not merely grown together by time, but by intention, as if they had woven themselves into a vault to contain the thing that stood below them. Their bark was darker here, streaked with hues not born of daylight, veins of shadow and silver caressing like frozen tears down their sides. And the ground, where roots should have broken through and leaf litter should have gathered, was bare and dry, as if the forest itself had recoiled from the black monolith that rose in its center. The stone was not large, but its presence made it feel so. It was tall as a man and wide as two, smooth in places, but fissured with ancient cracks through which a faint silver luminescence pulsed faintly, irregularly, like the heartbeat of something half forgotten, still dreaming in the cold. It was not beautiful. It was not monstrous. It was, instead, unnervingly indifferent, like something created not to inspire awe or dread, but simply to be, and that perhaps was the most disturbing part of it. Radagast stood before it in silence, his staff held lightly in his hand, the runes along its length shimmering with uncertain light, like the glow of fireflies caught in a jar too long closed. He did not speak at first. Words in places like this could not be cast about casually like pebbles tossed into a stream. Here a word might root, might echo, might awaken what had long chosen to sleep. And so he waited, listening not with ears alone, but with the deeper senses that had been gifted to him by the valor and sharpened through centuries of solitude among things that moved slowly and spoke seldom. Behind him, Thalionel remained quiet, his eyes fixed not on the stone, but on the space around it, the ring of shadow that pulled at its base, the way the light from Radagast's staff bent subtly around it, as though the stone devoured not only sound, but illumination itself. His hand rested on the hilt of his blade, not out of fear, but out of instinct, the reflex of a warrior who had fought many battles, but now faced something that could not be met with steel. Radagast finally spoke, not to the elf, nor to the forest, but to the thing itself. "You are old," he said, the words falling with a gravity that was not volume, but depth. "And you have forgotten your name." There was no reply, no shifting of the ground, no movement in the air, but the stone pulsed ever so faintly, and a subtle hum rose from its surface, a resonance not of sound, but of memory, like the distant tolling of a bell across centuries of silence. "You were planted here," Radagast continued, "not by malice, but by fear, not as a prison, but as a seal, a lock upon the wellspring of remembering, not to harm, but to protect." He stepped closer, the edge of his robe brushing the dry earth. But the seal has become the wound. What once held back sorrow has now begun to smother all joy. What once bound shadow now unbinds light. You feed on what should live. You drink what should sing. And the elves, whose souls are thread and song and memory, are unraveling in your silence. Thalionel spoke then slowly, his voice soft but strong, like the tone of a harp string plucked in the dark. I have felt it within me, not as an enemy, but as an emptiness, a quieting of things that once sang brightly inside me. I thought it was grief. I thought it was time, but now I know it is you. Not because you hate us, but because you no longer know us. He stepped forward, his hand no longer upon his sword, but extended not to strike, but to reach. You do not remember us, he said, eyes wide with pain and wonder. But we remember you. You were once the guardian of the Grove of Echoes. You were the keeper of the forgotten songs. You were born in the age when light first touched the bark of trees, and you sang to the roots to teach them how to drink. The stone pulsed again. Once, twice, and the ground trembled beneath their feet, not violently, but like a breath caught in the throat of the world. Radagast's voice softened, deepened. You are not evil. You are not cruel. You are simply alone, left too long without voice, left too long without name. And in your solitude, you have done what all forgotten things do. You have drawn the world into your forgetting. He lowered his staff, and the light at its tip dimmed. But we are here to remember you. And then slowly he knelt. He laid his staff upon the ground and pressed both hands to the dry earth. We remember the grove. We remember the song of first root. We remember the names whispered into leaves by starlight. We remember you. Thalionel knelt beside him. He closed his eyes, and from his lips came a whisper, not in the common tongue, nor in Quenya or Sindarin, but in the language of the forest before speech, vowels long and liquid, consonants soft as petals falling. It was a prayer, and it was a promise. And as he spoke, the earth warmed beneath them. The stone pulsed again, more brightly this time. A tremor passed through the trees above, and the vault of limbs swayed, not in resistance, but in rhythm. From the stone's cracks rose a light, not cold, not harsh, but green and gold, like sunlight filtered through spring leaves. And with that light came a sound, a low, mournful tone, as though the monolith had begun to weep. And then something miraculous occurred. The ground around the stone softened, darkened, drank deep of unseen waters. Small shoots broke through the soil, pale and trembling, but alive. Tiny leaves unfurled, and in the stillness of that place, a breeze finally stirred. The forest exhaled. Radagast looked up, tears in his eyes. It remembers. Thalionel's voice trembled as he added, and we are remembered. The monolith no longer pulsed. It glowed steadily now, a warm internal fire, not bright, not blinding, but calm and enduring, like the embers of a long-kept hearth. And somewhere deeper still, the roots of the forest stirred in recognition. A beginning had been made. They did not rise immediately, nor speak in haste, for there are moments in the life of the world so rare and delicate that even breath must be held gently, as if the air itself might fracture from the weight of sound. The glow that pulsed within the monolith was no longer eerie or lifeless, no longer a cold echo of something half-remembered, but a quiet flame of renewal. Subdued, yes, as though unsure of its own right to exist, but undeniably present. Like the first note in a long-forgotten song, it carried the shape of beauty that had once been and might yet be again. Around them, the clearing had begun to change, not rapidly or violently, but subtly, with the slow deliberation of life returning to places it had once loved but long avoided. A fine mist born from the warming earth began to rise in thin tendrils, coiling around the base of the stone like the soft arms of a child rediscovering an ancient toy. The trees above no longer hunched inward as jailers, but bowed now in reverence, their boughs swaying ever so slightly as if in response to a remembered melody. The ground, once barren and resistant, now bore faint shoots of green, small, uncertain, yet undeniably alive. And from deep within the roots and soil there came a sound, a murmur, distant and resonant, like the sigh of a sleeper beginning to wake. Radagast sat still, one hand pressed to the ground, the other resting loosely on his knee. His eyes were open but unfocused, as though gazing into something too vast to comprehend with vision alone. His breath was slow and measured, and in his stillness there was the grace of long sorrow meeting slow joy, a reunion not of bodies, but of understanding. When he finally spoke, it was not with the voice of command, but with the softness of one speaking to a wounded friend. "It is beginning," he said. The remembering Thiel, who had remained kneeling beside him, now turned slightly, his face pale with something that was not quite relief, not quite peace, but something near to them both, an emotion suspended between grief and wonder. "Do you feel it as I do?" he asked, his voice barely more than breath, not merely as a return of memory, but as a reweaving, as though the very threads of the world are knitting themselves back together, one by one, across the vast tapestry that had been unraveling without us ever truly seeing the fray. Radagast nodded, though his gaze remained distant. "Yes, and it is more than memory. It is identity. For we do not simply remember who we were, we remember why we were. And in that remembering, the forest itself is finding its name again. It was never merely a collection of trees. It was a mind, a soul stretched out over root and leaf and wind. It slept because it was forgotten. It faded because we ceased to speak to it. But now it stirs." Thalionel's eyes welled, though no tears fell. "I have feared for so long that we elves were fading, not because time willed it, but because we ceased to see the sacredness in ourselves. We traded memory for immortality, and in doing so became ghosts who could not die. But now I see we were not made to endure merely by existing. We endure by being remembered, by remembering, by being part of something older and deeper than ourselves." He rose then slowly, as one might rise from prayer, his movements graceful even in weariness. He stepped toward the monolith, not to touch it, but to regard it closely. This stone, it was never evil, was it? "No," Radagast answered, following his gaze. "It was made to protect. It was made to contain sorrow so great it threatened to poison the very roots of the world. But in time, even protectors forget why they guard. Even seals become prisons when the key is lost. What began as mercy became silence. The forest stirred around them, not in panic or unrest, but in something more elemental. A breeze passed through the trees, lifting fallen leaves that had lain still for countless years, sending them into a slow dance through shafts of soft light that filtered now from above. Clouds parting ever so slightly, allowing the morning sun to touch the clearing like the first rays of hope after a long vigil. "I wonder," mused, his voice low and rich with thought, "if the greatest dangers in this world are not those who burn or break, but those who forget their own purpose, their own beginning. Is that not how even the greatest among us fall? By forgetting the music that once shaped them." Radagast let the thought hang in the air before answering. "Yes, and that is why remembering is an act of healing, and not just for the remembered. When we name what was lost, when we bear witness to what once was, we not only restore the world, we restore ourselves." They stood in the clearing for some time, neither rushing to leave nor to speak again. Around them, the forest continued to shift. Small sounds emerging, the buzz of insects returning, the creak of branches no longer burdened by grief. Light played upon the bark, now mottled not with shadow alone, but with hints of golden green, like veins of hope threading through the memory of wood. Eventually, Radagast turned and began to gather his staff, the runes along it still softly aglow, though with a more gentle hue now, less like a warning and more like a lantern carried on a long road home. "There is more to be done," he said quietly. "The plague will not vanish in a day, nor will all the wounds of forgetting heal at once." Thalionel nodded, but his gaze lingered on the monolith, which no longer pulsed, but glowed with steady light beacon in deep places. "And what of it?" he asked. "Shall it remain here?" "Yes," Radagast replied. "It is no longer the wound. It is the scar. And scars, too, are memories. They are proof that healing has occurred. Let it stand not as a warning, but as a remembrance of what silence can become when left unchecked." Together they turned from the clearing and began the long path back, though no path could be seen. But the forest no longer resisted them. Where once brambles clung and trees hunched, now leaves parted, branches lifted, and the air moved freely once more, touched with the scent of dew and the music of awakening things. And behind them, the glade remained bathed in morning light, the monolith standing quiet and still, its glow mingling with the gold of the sun. An echo no longer of sorrow, but of restoration. And somewhere far beyond, in the hearts of the elves who had long ceased to sing, voices began to stir, with songs half-remembered, names long hidden returning to lips, dreams rekindled beneath the stars. The world, though still wounded, had begun to remember itself, and in that remembering, it had begun to heal. The forest they returned through was not the same one they had entered, though its trees bore the same roots, and the same ancient stones still slumbered beneath fallen leaves and moss-icked bark. Yet every inch of earth beneath their feet felt changed, not merely healed, but reawakened, like a house that had not simply been mended after ruin, but remembered how it once felt to be a home. The trees no longer loomed in a hunched and weary silence, but lifted their branches toward the sky with cautious grace, as if shyly remembering the way light once filtered through their crowns. There were moments now when shafts of morning sun slipped between boughs, not with sharpness or intrusion, but with gentleness, like old friends returning with songs rather than news. The air was cooler yet sweeter, It carried the scent of new buds, damp bark, and something older, like the perfume of memory, mingling with the breath of earth. And with each step, Radagast could feel the subtle pulses of life returning in ripples, the echoes of old names breathing once more in the undergrowth, the laughter of long dead springs resurfacing through sap and stream. He paused often, not from fatigue, for he was renewed in ways that made time feel light again, but to listen, to place his hand on the bark of a rejuvenated tree, to speak softly to a squirrel that lingered, or to press his palm to the lawn where new shoots unfurled like dreams pushing upward. These small gestures were not frivolous. They were reverence, a confirmation that the world had not rejected their work, but was instead beginning to respond tentatively, like a wounded bird deciding whether to fly again. Thiel walked beside him, his pace graceful yet contemplative, the way one moves through the echoes of a sacred place. His expression had changed, not dramatically, but subtly, as though the lines that sorrow had carved into his face had softened, not from the absence of grief, but from the quiet knowledge that grief, when named and held properly, need not lead to erasure. His eyes, those ancient wells of starlight, no longer looked only inward. They searched the branches above, the shadows beneath, the birds that now flitted among leaves with hesitant songs. And in his silence there was no numbness, only depth, the kind that grows after a long season of drought, when rain finally returns and soaks not just the ground, but the spirit. After a time, it was he who broke the quiet, his voice a slow river shaped by thought. "You know," he said, not looking at Radagast, but at the canopy above, "I used to believe that our departure from Middle East was a kind of dignity, that to fade, to leave, was not to abandon the world, but to honor the arc of our story, to recognize that our time had passed, and to return to the West, not in retreat, but in peace." He paused, his brow furrowing slightly, not with pain, but with the weight of introspection. "But now I wonder if perhaps that belief was itself a kind of forgetting, a quiet surrender to a silence we did not yet understand. I wonder if in retreating we were not leaving with grace, but fleeing from sorrow, afraid of what it might mean to stay, to endure, to continue remembering even as the world changed beyond our recognition." Radagast's voice, when it came, was gentle, like a hand brushing away cobwebs from a long, unopened window. "There is no shame in retreating from pain, Thalionel, but there is great wisdom in returning to face it. The elves were born under stars, before the sun, before time marched with such relentless rhythm. You were meant to remember, not just for yourselves, but for the world. You were the keepers of its stories, its sacred patterns, its first names. When the elves forget, it is not only your people who fade. It is the memory of the world itself that begins to dissolve." Thalionel sighed softly, and the wind echoed the sound, rustling the leaves above, as if even the forest mourned that truth. "Then perhaps this plague," he said, "was not merely an affliction, but a mirror, a reflection of the forgetting that had already begun in us long before the forest echoed it. The sickness did not come from the outside. It rose from within, from silence, seated in places we thought sacred because we had stopped listening." Radagast placed a hand on the elf's shoulder. "But you listened now, and that has made all the difference." They continued walking in silence for a while longer, the path widening as it approached the outer borders of the forest, where the land met clearer skies and the breath of the world moved more freely. Here the light took on a golden hue, bright and warm, but not harsh, like the glow of a hearth seen from a hill at twilight, welcoming it. And in the distance, through the veil of trees, the shape of Radagast's cottage came into view, small and tangled with ivy, its roof a quilt of moss and birdsong. Smoke curled from its crooked chimney, and the garden, once withered and mournful, now bloomed with early blossoms, modest, shy. As they reached the threshold, Radagast turned, looking back into the forest with a gaze that was not farewell, but benediction. "She will sleep lighter now," he said softly, "and when next we walk beneath her branches, she will remember our names." Thalionel nodded, the weight of that truth settling into his heart like a stone cast gently into still water. "And perhaps," he added, "we shall remember our own." Radagast smiled, a slow, quiet thing that creased his weathered face and made his eyes gleam with warmth. He opened the door and stepped inside, the light from the hearth spilling out onto the threshold, casting golden patterns on the grass. Inside, birds chirped softly. The scent of tea and dried herbs drifted lazily through the air, and the house felt as though it had been waiting, not with impatience, but with love. Thalionel followed, his steps light, his presence no longer hollow. Outside, the forest watched, and from the roots to the highest leaves it remembered. It remembered names whispered in grief and sung again in hope. It remembered hands pressed gently to bark and prayers spoken into stone. It remembered pain, yes, but also healing. And in its great, quiet heart, it remembered love. The Elven Plague was ending, not because the darkness had been slain, but because the silence had been broken. And through that crack in silence, the song had begun to rise again.